You're listening to the Handcrafted Therapy Podcast with massage therapist and business owner, Julie Alexander. That's me. I'm your host. I've been a massage therapist for 17 years, and I have a business marketing degree. On this podcast, we'll be interviewing industry professionals that can talk to us about how to run your business better, how to be a better massage therapist overall, and how to take care of yourself and give yourself a little love, a little self-care, little grace in your life. I am so glad that you're here. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm excited that you're here. I am so happy that you agreed to join me on my podcast today. Felicia Brown is assistant as a massage therapy instructor. I had the pleasure of being in one of her classes at the AMTA National Convention. And I've been following her on social media. So I'm so glad that Felicia's here. Thank you for joining us, Felicia.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for the descriptor of magnificent. That's just a great way to start my day. Thank you.
Of course, you're welcome. I want to start off talking about your ducks.
What ducks?
Yeah. So I would love for you in your own words to talk about how you got into the rubber ducky business and the races that you do and what that has to do with massage therapy.
Right. Well, yeah, it's kind of a hard, how to make the leap from one to the other. Well, as you may remember, Julie, I have been a massage therapist since 1994. And in that time, I've owned several different spas. The most recent of one I started in 2013. And like everybody else, in 2020, there was a moment in time where we had to just kind of stop operations and shut down. So I had to send my staff and myself of 31 people home and close the doors. And what happened was that I got really depressed and anxious. I mean, there was a lot going on. Besides just the whole pandemic and craziness of that time, the feelings of overwhelm and anxiety from, being worried about my team and what they were going to do. And also who am I if I'm not a massage therapist? Who am I if I'm not a spa owner? Who am I if I can't go out and speak and teach? And so there was a lot of just overwhelming emotion going on. And one day I was having one of those days where I just couldn't quite get out of bed. And it's about 2:00 in the afternoon. I thought, God, I can't stay here, right? I've got to do something. Let me see if I can think back to a time when I was really feeling good. And, maybe there's some way I can find a way to get that feeling again. So I thought back to a massage therapy conference where I was teaching in Florida. It was the Florida State Massage Therapy Association. And they had this rubber duck race. And even though I didn't really understand what people were excited about with the rubber duck race, later in the day, there was a dance party where this big wagon full of rubber ducks showed up after, at the end of the day. And it's possible a few cocktails may have been consumed by the people in the room. I'm not sure. But I will say that the ducks were met with incredible excitement. And we basically rushed the wagon and everybody, was grabbing ducks and they're going, over our heads and into our pants and shirts and on our hats and whatever. Anyway, there were a lot of blurs of yellow on the dance floor that night. And we just had so much fun. And I thought, God, if I could get back to that moment in time, I felt so good that night. And then I thought, wait a minute, I have 2 of those ducks on my bathtub and a few others that joined them. And so I grabbed the ducks and ran downstairs and asked my husband if we could have a duck race. And that kind of started this collection back here and a lot of other things. So.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. It's such a pleasure to follow you and your little duck races. It's been a moment of fun and lightheartedness in a time of, like you said, during the pandemic where a lot of us felt like we didn't have any control over anything. There was a sense of how can I help, but there's no way of really doing much. And so I'm glad you found your spirit through the rubber duckies. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. I mean, honestly, it just started out as like a desperate woman's attempt to feel any amount better. But what happened, as you were kind of alluding to, is that that race led to other races. And this group up here on the top shelf, those were the five that were sitting on my bathtub. They're now known as the Dream Team Ducks. And they, as we started having races, people got caught up in the excitement. And actually, most of these ducks back here, people sent to me. Like, I don't buy them, but people send them to me. And so we started doing races, and I was videotaping them, putting them online. And so that's how these other ducks started showing up in my life, because people were like, oh, I want to add a competitor or something. And anyway, it just turned into a thing. And now how it's really tying back into massage therapy is the Dream Team Ducks and I guess we could say we're collaborating on some children's books. And we've got a big one that's going to be released very soon that relates to the Massage Therapy Foundation. It's called On Marshall and the Dream Team Ducks Go to Boston. And the whole book is about the Dream Team Ducks going to meet their friend Marathon Marshall at the start of the Boston Marathon. And my friend and colleague, Marshall Donachie, is running the Boston Marathon. He's actually my co-author for this book. And the book and Marshall are helping to raise money in their efforts. So every copy sold of the book will donate $1 or one duck buck, as we like to call them, to the Massage Therapy Foundation. And then other books that I'm writing with the ducks will donate $1 or a duck buck to other charities. So it's kind of an exciting way to tie these two passions of mine together and, help the Dream Team Ducks become the international superstars they're meant to be. So.
Wow, that's exciting. I'm so happy for you and the book. I mean, what a cool way to tie it all together with a Boston Marathon runner and the ducks and massage. I love it. So, Felicia, one thing that we focus on in this podcast is how to help nurture the listener who's usually a massage therapist, usually a business owner. You've been in the business a long time, since 1994, and you help coach massage therapists in this way. What is something that, our listeners can take away from what you teach?
Well, the very most important thing I ever teach, and I share it in almost every class that I do. And so I'd like to share it here. It's a quote, but it's something that I really live by and I think is applicable to any business person, whether you're a solo practitioner or you own your own spa, or even if you work somewhere else, you're just trying to achieve certain things within your little mini practice or mini business. And that is that action is the foundational key to success or for all success. And I think, one thing that I've encountered in my years of business and my years of coaching is that there are many people who have incredible skills. They have, whether it's business skills or hands-on skills or marketing skills,
everything all over the place. And it's so disorganized. And some of them are millionaires. They have very successful businesses and totally, that blew my mind, because I was like, a millionaire or a billionaire could have a box full of receipts and be completely in the dark about their, expenses. And he's like, absolutely, that happens all the time. And so that just put a big wet blanket on my anxiety. And he gave me the advice to make sure that I kept everything, my finances, between personal and business completely separate. That was the first thing he said. Just go ahead and do everything separate. Open up a business account. Keep everything personal, and everything business. And that really helped me get the motivation and the courage to move forward, because I was stuck. There was a wall there for me. So if you can identify what your wall is, what's stopping you from making that action, I think that's even more important, because then you can move forward with that action, right?
For sure. Well, one of the struggles that I've had, and I admit I still struggle with it, is delegation. And I think there's a pressure I don't know why we have this pressure, but we feel this internal pressure that we have to know everything and we have to do everything. Or we have to touch everything, like we have to oversee everything. And I know my first spa, which I started pretty early, I was only 26 when I started it. I didn't know how to delegate. I felt like I had to be a part of everything. And I, was at work like early in the morning and I was there late at night and I was there on the weekends. And it was just like work, work, work. I was seeing clients. I was managing things. I was overseeing people, doing the ordering, all these things. And I'm really glad I learned to have that experience to get it. But there's a couple of things that happen. One, I burned myself out over and over again. And it's something I really have to work on. I mean, it's not like, oh, I learned my lesson. I've never been burned out since. But, I did that quite a few times. But the result of that, at least this happened to me once, was that by the time, I got so burned out that I was suddenly realizing, oh, I need to ask for some help, that I blindly asked for help, put my trust in someone that hadn't earned it, and they stole a lot of money from me. And it was like done very, well, let's put it this way. Thieves are good at hiding what they do. Like if that's what they're into, like they've got a plan. It wasn't obvious. And so because I was so tired and whatever, I just didn't notice. So I think the temptation is, oh, I can do it all and I should be able to do it all. And I don't want to ask for help. And then we get ourselves into binds because we didn't ask for help and because we try to do it all. Another example I could give is kind of along the accounting lines. Like I thought, oh, well, when I first started, I'm going to do my own payroll. And I can do it. I can figure it out. I think I had QuickBooks perhaps, and it said it could do whatever. Well, let's just say that's not my strong suit. Okay. I did do it myself, and I also did it wrong. And I also ended up owing hundreds of dollars in penalties for doing it wrong in terms of like paying the payroll tax wrong or paying the wrong amount, or I don't even remember. It's been so long. But I quickly saw that there was a high value to paying someone who really knew it, for them to do it and me to just not have to worry about it. And so after that happened, I hired a bookkeeper and I hired a payroll company. And, two best investments that I made, in that business. And even now I don't do my payroll and I have someone that does my bookkeeping for me.
Nice. So you are seeing clients currently and you're instructing, is that correct?
So I'm not seeing massage therapy clients currently. I work with coaching clients. So I can't really say I see them because it's all virtual. So sometimes I do, but most of the time it's just by phone. So I see clients that way. And I do some specialty consulting as well as education. One of my new things, and I hope that there's a continuation of this. I've recently been doing some classes for one of my coaching clients for her staff. So I'm doing classes on, it's like a series where we do the client attraction and goal setting, client retention, upselling and upgrading, and then retailing. So like 4 components, and it's a little bit more in depth than that on things. But basically the idea is to pass on what I'm teaching the business owner to her team in a way that they understand it. Because, and if anybody listening is a business owner, you're going to understand this analogy probably. You are the mom or the dad of your business, and anybody that works in that business are like your kids. So sometimes, I'm not like this with everybody, but there's certainly people that are going to respond to you as if they're your kid. And so you say, hey, it would be really great if you do whatever. And there's an eye roll and a like, oh gosh, I hate it when mom asks me to do this, right? Because mom only wants me to do it for whatever her reasons are. Your cool aunt could come over and say the exact same thing in a slightly different way. And the kid or the staff member will be like, oh my God, that was the greatest idea I've ever heard. And, meanwhile, you as the business owner or parent are like, yeah, that's what I've been saying, like that's what you've been talking about. But it just has a different ring to it when some outsider or some, here I am, like I'm this consultant, this national speaker. I come in, there's like a certain cachet to it. So I've been doing some of that. I really am enjoying that. And I'd love to do more of that kind of thing. So working on developing some marketing for that. And I'm also doing some webinars on self-care for some larger companies. And so anybody have an inside edge on that, call me.
That's a really interesting side hustle, doing webinars for self-care for corporate. because
Mhm.
I really like that, because I have noticed a uptick in corporate America being really drawn to the idea of, mental health care and self-care in general, because we all know that if we are feeling good mentally and physically, that we're going to work better. We're going to be better, more efficient and effective employees for that company. Whether you're a massage therapist, or whether you're a janitor or a CEO or a maid, or, whoever, you're going to
Right.
work better if you have the skills and tools to help yourself be more mentally aware and physical and present. And, my last, gosh, one of the episodes, I can't remember which episode it was, where we talked about being present in the moment, you know, and it can be really challenging sometimes, because we've had a whole life that we've lived. And up until now, all of those experiences and all of that life has brought us to this moment. And we've learned all of these things. And so it's hard to not think about the past. And then we've got all these plans for the future that we're thinking about. But as a massage therapist, as a business owner, you really have to be present in today's moment. You have to really think about the person that you have on your table at the moment, and allow yourself to be there and not think about your shopping list, or, all the things you have to do outside of that room, right? You want to give your client 110% of you as best that you can. And to do that, you have to be present in the moment. And, payroll is a really good example of a really painful point. I understand that. I did my own payroll through QuickBooks too. And luckily I had some coaching around that and was able to do it. But I ended up shifting my business from employees to renters, because I found that employees are very challenging. You kind of put it in a mom or parent perspective. I usually call it like adult babysitting.
Mhm.
Very similar. I love the renter model because they pay me and they do all the work. It does cap your income a little more than an
Sure.
employee situation, but it is a good option if people are out there looking to expand their business and are hesitant about running payroll and having employees and all the things that come with that. That might be another option if you get a bigger space, a shared space, and rent out your rooms. It does help you pay the rent. So
Yeah, it can. I mean, I've done all the models just about. I've had renters, I've had independent contractors, and I've had employees, and I've used different pay structures within the employee scenario. And what I personally found for me is that my tendency is to grow and to bring in the renter. What ended up happening with me multiple times is that I had the renter in place and my business outgrew theirs and I needed their space because I couldn't facilitate sessions or services for the people that I had in the space that I had. And I would end up overtaking the renters. And this has happened to me multiple times. And I also found that, I mean, it depends on the situation, but you got to, no matter what model you pick, whether you have renters, contractors, or employees, you have to know who you want in that space and what the relationship is going to be like or what you want it to be like ahead of time. If you just think I'll just rent to any random person, no, I would say no. If you were in my classes at AMTA National, as Julie was, then you would know that I talk a lot about, setting an expectation or maybe writing a wish list of what you want in a particular party in your business, whether this is an employee or a renter or a boss or, a partner, any of those. And we're talking about going into business for yourself or having a practice. A lot of people are considering partnerships. And so you have to personally get really clear on what you're looking for. And I'm not, this isn't like to be nitpicky. This is really just to be like, okay, let me know what my deal breakers are or my must haves. What would make me function at my best or what would make my business operate the best? And what is like, I just can't deal with it. And what has come out of me doing this. I mean, when I've done it multiple times, but for my last spot, I ended up realizing that it signified or cemented the mission of our business, which was that it should be a place of healing for all who walk through our doors. And that our mantra for the business was to love our clients. And I knew that anybody I would bring in had to be willing to love our clients in the same way I would. And that by creating a place of healing for all who walk through our doors, that has to be us too. And so we have to bring in the right people to fit our culture and that are going to understand how we do things here. And, before I would even have someone come in and interview for a position as a massage therapist or a service provider, I would send them a copy of the job description that outlined our culture as well as what the job entailed. And that way they could look at it and be like, oh, wow, this sounds great. Or, yeah, this doesn't seem like a good fit. And then I wouldn't waste either of our time on an interview. And I think that clarity really helped make that business very successful because people knew what they were getting into before they walked in the door. I mean, we had, of course, like anything, we had a few missteps here and there. But by understanding that up front, it allowed us to attract the right people in the first place. And that's a huge tip. Another, like, if you want to be successful, I mean, take action, but also have clarity about what you want so that when you see it, you know it.
That's a really great point. We talk about, and in your class, we talked about this, and I've talked about this on the podcast, is writing down who your target audience is, who your target clients and target market are, who's your perfect person to come in. But this is an example of a way to do that for your renters or employees or other people that you'll be, quote unquote, living with while you work together, right? And I've had some experiences similar to yours where I've been taken advantage of, and I've learned how to set boundaries with those people better now. I can still be empathetic and, stern and say, I don't want the front desk to look like a mess. I don't want all of everybody's paperwork all over the front desk, or I don't, I want us to work together on the laundry. I know laundry is a hot topic with massage therapists. Sharing the facilities in a way that kind of makes sense for all of us to work together better. One thing I do with my group of renters is I take them out to dinner once a quarter. It ends up being twice a year, to be honest, because of scheduling conflicts. But at least we do it a couple times a year. And it's a way to just get away from work. We're not in the office. We're at a fancy restaurant and we like to dress up. And it's kind of like a date with our coworkers. And I found that it's just so fulfilling because we don't talk about work. We don't talk about our business. We talk about our lives and how we feel and what is going on outside of work. Because at work, we're working. We're talking about work. We're thinking about work. We're asking questions to each other about work. But in this setting, it's completely different. And we get to know each other on a personal level at our discretion, right? So I think that's good to nurture those, just like you would nurture a client therapist relationship, you want to nurture that coworker relationship as well.
For sure. Well, here's the thing. I take great pride in the fact that people have told me for years from my first business on, that I created a family and that, and in fact, a friend just recently told me, I asked him, he got a new job and I said, what's it like? And he said, it's like your spa. Everybody gets, like they're professional, but they really treat each other with respect and kindness, and they really seem to get along. And there's like this camaraderie there that I haven't seen in a lot of workplaces. And I think, it doesn't happen accidentally. It is absolutely something you have to cultivate. And like what you were saying, Julie, about taking them out for dinner twice a year. I know I've done a lot of little things like that just to nurture and care for the people on my team. It could be something really simple. during the summertime, we would have an ice cream social. I would just go to the store and get a bunch of different kinds of like, I don't know, ice cream bars, ice cream sandwiches, stuff like that. And we'd make an announcement and I'd put the ice cream in the freezer and people could just go get an ice cream sandwich on their break. It's a little tiny thing, but the warmth and the appreciation that comes from that is surprising. Doing something simple like we did birthday cake every month just because we couldn't remember we had a lot of people, 31 people on my team when at the beginning of COVID. So we would just have, okay, this month's birthdays are, and we would have a birthday time and we would have a birthday party and everybody would come in and get birthday cake. It's something really simple, but these little ways of acknowledging people and letting them know that you see them as a person and not just a dollar sign, because I think that's a real problem in our industry that I won't name any names, but I've heard many stories from all different kinds of businesses where people feel like they're just a dollar sign walking in the door and that the person or company that they work for doesn't think of them as, someone who has needs. They don't acknowledge like they have limitations with their hands or with their schedule. And they just, like want to turn and burn and churn the work out of them. And it doesn't take a lot to show appreciation. It takes effort, but it doesn't have to take a lot of money. And, people that are starting out, like I know one of the complaints I read sometimes on social media or I'll see online is like, well, I don't get paid enough. I'm going to just be upfront and say, I haven't always been able to pay a lot. I've started out with like, I barely got the 2 nickels to rub together to put a dime in a payphone, like, what does anybody here even know what a payphone is? Am I just too old here? But the point is that, it's not about the money. If people feel appreciated and they feel valued, if they know that there's the promise of more and that you're going to continue to work to get better, you don't have to start out at like the top dollar paying someone necessarily. I mean, do what you can, but not to your own detriment. That's a big lesson. I will say, like, don't hurt yourself to pay someone else. If we can get more into that in another moment, but if you can do things to show people that you appreciate them, I mean, pick up a dozen donuts on the way into the office and put them in your break room, or, bring in flowers for everybody on Valentine's Day. I mean, I don't care what it is, just something so that people know that you care and you see them beyond, what their hands can do for you.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. We have a whiteboard in my break room and it's kind of there just so we can leave each other notes because, we're in services and sometimes we don't even see each other all day long, but we'll leave notes of encouragement on there and like I bought new markers and I made a rainbow, just something silly to like when they walk in there to put the dirty laundry and go to the next client, at least they can smile. And we all have the capability of just writing something on the board that just makes you feel better about each other. And I think that's really helped our nurturing of our coworkers as well. But I want to ask you another question because this is something that I've struggled with, and I'm sure there's other massage therapists out there that are struggling with this, is that you build a business and your clients love you. And they love you. They don't love your employees. How do you go from having a successful practice to telling your clients, now I've hired, I don't know, what's her name? Let's say Maria. We've hired Maria as a massage therapist and they don't know Maria. Why would they want to go to Maria? How do you make that transition? You've had several employees and had to deal with this over the years.
Several. Yes. Several employees.
Yes.
Lost count. There's different ways you could do it. And it is tricky because yes, your clients love you. And by the way, what you're asking about isn't just something to free yourself up. This is also something like if you ever want to sell your business, that it's important that your business is an entity outside of you. If you were the only thing supporting your business, if it's you, then it's a much harder thing to sell. So just a side note there, but there's a few things you could do. One, raise your prices. Like you charge more than all the other therapists. So let's say you want Maria to have clients, you bring her in at an introductory rate, perhaps because she's trying to start up. And I don't know, I'm just going to use numbers. These don't mean anything. These are just examples. So let's say that your rate is currently $80 an hour. and you want clients to try Maria out. So you give her an introductory rate of $70 an hour for, say, I don't know, her first 3 months or something. And you're like, and by the way, my prices are going up to $95 an hour. So there's a price difference there, so that the people that really want you go to you and they're willing to pay a higher price, or the people that are like on the fence are going to be like, oh, it's less than you and you're going up. So it's like, then there's an incentive both ways for them to try Maria. But you could also, there's some other more subtle things you could do. Like you could get a massage from Maria and tell all your clients, oh my gosh, I had the most incredible massage from Maria. Let me tell you, I'm really good at neck work, but if you like foot massage, and I know you do, you got to check her out. It was absolutely the best foot massage I've ever had, or whatever Maria is good at. And you sell that person in such a way that the client is intrigued. And maybe that's when you're like, hey, if you want to try Maria out, you can try her for this introductory rate. So you've kind of got like, you're telling them something good about Maria, how much you loved her, and then try them out. Or perhaps, another way, and this worked pretty well for me as a traveling speaker, one who's gone fairly often, or was certainly when I had my full-time practice, be like, I'm going to be gone next week and Maria is going to be taking all my clients. So you don't have to give up your regular appointment. I've informed Maria of all your preferences and she is really looking forward to seeing you. And then, some people will be like, that's all right, I'll wait. But many people will be like, oh, well, okay, I guess I don't want to miss my appointment. So, I'll try her this time. So those are a few things that I might suggest. And there's other ways to promote Maria. I mean, you can send out information in an email. You could offer like some kind of again, not a discount, but an upsell. Like, well, Maria's doing a free foot scrub with every hour massage that she does. Try and promote her that way. So those are just a few things I might try.
Those are some great tips. I'm so glad I asked that question. Thank you for explaining that to me. I appreciate it.
For sure.
Felicia, is there any struggles, stories, opportunities that you've gone through in your career that you want to share with us that have really taught you some lessons?
Well, I mean, there's a few, besides the duck race and all of that. Well, what I was thinking about earlier, and, when you were talking about how you were so fearful and nervous about opening your practice and fear of failure, I guess, perhaps, I was drawn back to this young lady that I had in a class last year. And she was telling me about the business that she started and all the ways that she did it wrong and really, really being hard on herself. I mean, she was just putting herself down and like, I'm a bad person. I didn't do well and I wasted all this money, blah, 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 blah. It's so easy to be hard on ourselves, right? When we fail. And I say that for anybody that's listening to this and not watching, failure in quotation marks, when we quote unquote fail. And I listened to her and I had such compassion because, about 12 or 13 years ago, I had a quote unquote failure. I had sold my first spa, had done very well with it, and swore I was never going to have another one. That was it. Done with employees. Don't want to have a spa. That's it. And what happened was I opened another spa. I have a disease. I don't know. It's a spa opening disease. I don't know what's wrong with me. But anyway, I opened this other spa right before the economy crashed in the recession. And we went from having a line of people, standing at the door, banging, basically, please let us in. We want you to open, to people telling me that they were going to go across town to get a brow wax because it was $2 cheaper. And, many other stories of I'm not coming in. Let me give you my laundry list of reasons why. So that didn't go very well financially, as you might imagine. And I ended up closing that spa after less than a year. It caused me to have to file bankruptcy. And, you can imagine, like, when you have a really successful spa and you sell it for a pretty penny. I mean, I sold it for a lot of money, to go from that to having a spa that like crashes and burns, where you think you know it all. I mean, that, I will admit, I had a little bit of an ego thinking, oh, well, I got through 9/11. I had a business during that challenging time. I can get through anything. I learned a lot of humility, but I also went through this like major self-esteem crisis there for a while about like, oh, I'm a failure, kind of like what the girl in my class was bringing to me. And the hindsight on that is that it wasn't failure at all. it was tuition. Like I was paying a really pretty price in tuition for the School of Business Education. And, what's interesting is that it probably helped me more than anything really I could have imagined. I mean, it's certainly, you learn a lot through growing a business and building it, and there's knocks and falls all along the way. But that in particular taught me a lot. And the biggest thing that I learned from it was that you have to be in a business for the right reasons. And it has to be because you want to. It can't be something that just looks good on paper, which is kind of how this business was. I mean, it was perfect on paper, made every bit of sense you can imagine. But my heart really wasn't in it. Like I did it for the wrong reasons. I opened this other business out of guilt for a bunch of people that wanted to come and work for me again. They'd worked in the first spa. And, I let that flattery get to me a little bit. And I also, I felt like I had abandoned my children in a way when I sold that first business. There was a lot of emotion there. So, when I went to open my last spa, which is A to Zen, I was very deliberate about the way I set it up. I was very intentional about why I was doing it and how I was doing it and who I was bringing in and what I wanted to accomplish with it in a way I hadn't been with the one that closed. With that one, I was just kind of like, oh, it looks good on paper. Okay, let's go for it. And the difference was I was like so tied into that other spa. Like it didn't matter to me if I couldn't put a full tank of gas in my car because I had to spend $20 on massage lotion or whatever. It didn't matter to me. I was excited because I was building something that mattered to me, that meant something. And I think as you're thinking about, like people listening, as you're thinking about going out and opening a practice or partnering with somebody or whatever, listen to that. Don't do it just because it sounds like a good idea. Like you've really got to have some heart in the game. Your heart's got to be invested because when times are good, oh yeah, the on-paper business is great. But when times are bad, it is not. And it's that love and that devotion that you have to your place, to your practice, to your business, to your baby, that will pull you through those tough times and make you get creative and find a way to do what you need to do to make it grow or to just stabilize it or whatever. And it's that same, like, I feel like it's that same thing that helps to build the culture of the other people in there, because when they see you're invested in it, they're invested in it. And I think that, as I'm sort of having an aha about the old business right now, maybe I wasn't as invested in it as I could have been. And so my team wasn't either. And that's a new wrinkle of learning. So thanks. See, it's the gift that keeps on giving. Tuition that I keep getting something back from.
Thank you for sharing that. Sometimes it's hard to admit our biggest mistakes in life and in business. And, like you said, those are opportunities for you to continue to learn from even years later. And, I'm so thankful for people like you who have gone through the trenches of opening and closing and selling spas and being successful and finding your failures or your opportunities. And finding ways to learn from this business and helping others like us that are working on building our businesses or working on shifting our business, changing our business model, hiring employees, making the changes that we need to do for our business. And, when you were explaining to me about the feelings about a business, the word that kept resonating in my head was passion. You have to have passion for it. And I think the passion does, when you have passion for something, like most massage therapists do when they start a business, they have passion for massage. It just seeps out of you. It glows. And your clients feel it, and your coworkers feel it, and everybody sees how passionate you are about it. And when I feel like that passion has been dampened for me personally, I go take a class, because the classes or the continuing education classes really help me reignite my passion. When you're in a rut, what do you do when you have to reignite your passion?
Well, I was just thinking about that. There was a point in time where I thought, oh my gosh, how am I going to continue in massage? I'm so burned out on it. And what did it for me, there was a period of time where I did this, I guess it was kind of like a podcast, an online radio show where I interviewed different speakers from around the massage industry and some other healing too. There were some chiropractors and acupuncturists, but it was mostly massage therapy. And hearing about the different modalities and talking to all of these these national and internationally known educators and understanding like what drives them and also what techniques they're working with and how they're helping other people really just reignited me. And so, I mean, like, I'm sure there's people listening to this podcast that are like, oh my gosh, I got some ideas and I'm really excited. I mean, you have to just fill yourself up somehow. But for me, that passion, like I have the passion about the business part. I like that. That's like always been my thing, the marketing and the business development. Where I was struggling at the time was like the doing of the massage and the having a business that did stuff. Like I just like, oh my gosh, am I going to have employees again? Why would I want to do this? But in listening to these different speakers and hearing about them and hearing about different healing modalities, I started getting this picture in my mind of what I could bring to my community and how I could bring a resource that was missing in such a way that it would fill me up. Like that was the key. It had to be something that fed me, hence the mission of the business has to be a place of healing for all who walk through our doors. Because if it didn't include me in there, if it was just for everybody else, then that wasn't going to work. And so I made sure to put therapies in there that were good for me, to put systems in there that helped me have autonomy so that I could continue to teach and travel and not be tied down by a brick and mortar business. And I think that's important. Like when you're setting up a business, you have to know yourself and what your needs are. And that was something I wasn't willing to give up, because I get re-energized by going to conferences and speaking. And it's interesting. I don't know which class you were in of mine at AMTA, if it was my first group or my second group, but that particular event, I was on fire. I just was like, woo, I was there. I just had this incredible energy. And I have gotten more people who have been attracted to me, as clients or just in general, as friends or connections from that event. And I think it was because I personally was like flying so high. I was so in it to win it, and I've really I've reaped the benefit, if you will. And that's the same thing as what you're talking about, Julie, is like when you are in your business and you're on fire for it, it's like it opens doors, the power of that passion. And here's the thing I've been listening to lately about knowing what you want to feel like and being able to move towards that. Like in my business, I want to feel passionate. I want to feel on fire. I want to feel rewarded. When you know what you're looking for and you believe it's going to happen, it's going to come to you. But if you're like, oh, I'm just doing it to make some money or, bring in some random person because they have rent dollars, it isn't going to be the same. That's why that clarity is so important,
I completely agree. Yeah, absolutely. I love it. I love it. Well, so you have a coaching business. Can you kind of talk a little bit about what that means and what a therapist, if they were to hire you, what kind of results would they get?
Right. So, well, basically I guess I would say there's two basic things I do as far as the coaching. The first is like an initial call with people. And this is an initial call where we actually do stuff. It's not just like where I try to sell you for the time. So it is a paid service. But I ask people to bring the problem that they're trying to solve or the goal they're trying to accomplish to the call so that we can talk about that and they can tell me a little bit about it and what they've been doing that's been working and what hasn't been working. And then we'll go through some very specific steps that they can take, some actions, because I'm all about action, some actions that they can take. And sometimes that is, hey, I'm not the right person for this. Let me suggest you contact this other person. Like if they wanted financial help, I might be like, well, here's some basic concepts. Let me refer you to my finance person because that's not my thing. And sometimes I might send them to a different coach if I feel like what they're looking for is a little bit out of my expertise, or I feel like they'd just be a better fit. So sometimes that's what happens. But generally in that 30 or 60-minute call, we get a really good feel for like, would this be a good longer term solution, that I can help with? And the client is going to get some very specific things that they can take home and do. And that way they're getting, it's not, like I said, it's not just an informational session. What I would say most people do from that is they go to the next step, which is they do a coaching program with me or a package, which is not a long-term thing. It's like a six 30-minute sessions or 3 1-hour sessions, depending on how they decide to use it. And we take whatever it is that they're working on and we build progress or build steps in to help them get there. What their results are going to be is kind of dependent upon what they're trying to accomplish. But I would say regardless of the problem or the goal, that program, and if they stick with it, I mean, if they're not into it, then it's not going to happen. But if they do what we talk about and we stick with the sessions and keep them going, they'll gain momentum. And after those 6 sessions or those 3 hours, they're going to be like, okay, I've got this. Now I know what I'm doing. I've got a plan and I'm moving ahead. And then typically, maybe they'll come back and we'll do another series a year later, or they'll call me up and just do what I call an a la carte session where they're like, I have this problem. Can you help me? So that's most of what I do. I know some coaches out there are like, oh, you have to sign up for a year. And, I don't like that personally. And I don't want to do that. I want to give people enough that they can go do what they need to do and get on their way and then come back when they need help with something.
Awesome. Thank you for explaining that. I mean, there are so many professional coaches out there. And one thing that I really want to specifically talk about with Felicia is that she's in our industry and there are some specific opportunities and frustrations that we find that are special to our industry. And I think that's what makes massage therapy, professional coaching that you're doing very, very important to our listeners, because I want our listeners to know that there are people like you out there that are here to help and care about our industry and care about, massage therapy and want you to grow and learn and want to give you the tools to move forward and find those areas of obstacles that may be really painful for you to get through. I mean, some of this stuff is because you've got to really reach deep and go, I'm bad at this. I am bad at accounting, and admit it to yourself, admit it to others, and figure out a solution how you get past that. This is what and sometimes identifying what that is difficult. Sometimes we don't know until it becomes a problem,
Well, and I want to point out, like, what most people hire me for, they know me for, is business and marketing. And that, that's kind of a broad term. Marketing is kind of my passion. And I would say the majority of my clients come to me for something like client attraction, client retention, growing their sales, or expanding their business. That's the majority. But I also have clients that will call me for personnel issues. They're struggling, like they can't attract the right people. Or a big one that I've been dealing with for the last several years, and this is, I do some specialty consulting for this outside of the business owners, but is dealing with, I guess we'll call it professionalism and client care. And, we can wrap this into the service, but also professional ethics, a sort of side, if you want to call it a side hustle, that's actually a lot more now. I do a lot of work as an expert witness in the massage industry for cases related to different things, but most of them, unfortunately, are sexual misconduct and sexual assault. And, what I share with people is that often I'll look at a case and as I'm reading the various materials, I'm looking at it and I'm like, I think this is really a case of miscommunication or lack of communication, lack of understanding of boundaries, lack of of following, basic boundary guidelines where there's not an intent for someone to actually assault the client, but the client still perceived it as such. And that's all that really matters in a case like that. And so sometimes I'll have clients that reach out to me for that type of help. And I think, when you talk about creating a successful business, I mean, I'm like not trying to scare anybody here, but you've got to really know what's going on, like what your therapists are doing as far as like what their practices are. Obviously, you can't be in the room with them, but you want to be really clear about how you need to protect your business and take the right steps. And there's a lot of things that I didn't do. I mean, I remember many, many years ago in my first spa, I had a staff member come to me and say she had been sexually harassed by one of our massage therapists. And I didn't even know what that meant. I didn't understand what she was talking about. And it wasn't like on the massage table. It was elsewhere in the business. And so I got a real quick education on what sexual harassment was and had to take classes and hire a consultant and whatever. It was an expensive endeavor, but it alerted me to the fact that those of us that touch people for our job, we maybe sometimes forget that other people don't do that. And we forget like, oh, if you just go and touch a coworker in the workplace, they may take offense to that. Whereas I'd be like, oh, rub me, please.
Huh.
So
Yeah.
anyway, that's sometimes what people call and ask me for help on. And so if someone is like, I don't know what what policies to have or what documents I should have in place or how I can safeguard myself to, if there ever is a lawsuit, I mean, even in a renter situation, it could still happen. That's the kind of thing I advise people onto. Not nearly as much fun as the marketing, but it's, if you have yourself covered, it's a lot less painful if something like that does happen.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I mean, we haven't really talked about that a lot on this podcast. So I'm really happy that you did talk about that, because that's something that unfortunately is happening more and more in our world right now. And, you can only do so much, right? And you can't control what's happening in the massage room when you're not there and your employee is with your client. And yeah, I mean, we're touchy-feely people. I found myself in social situations where, it's not inappropriate, but some people are not used to that. Mm-hmm. Being touched, even if it's just on the arm or on the shoulder or something. They're just not used to being, or find myself being a little more close to somebody when that's not their, they step back. And I think, in reading people, whether it's a client or a coworker or just a friend in a social setting, we have to always be conscious and respectful of people's boundaries. And learn to listen to their body if they're moving away from you, or if they're telling you, or, telling you I'm not comfortable with this. That's a big sign. But a lot of times it doesn't come out as words, right? And it's right. You got to read the body. And lots of massage therapists were really good at that, because that's kind of our natural way of communicating and listening to the body is, I always say I listen with my hands, but sometimes that doesn't come naturally to all of us, but we have to be aware of that, because if we do cross a boundary, that even if it was unintentional, that could turn into something legal, and we have to be able to protect ourselves. And it's good to know that you as a professional are out there helping as a consultant if we need it. And hopefully we never do, but it is what it is, part of our world.
Well, the thing that I would say to people is it's better to be prepared and not need it than to not be prepared and need it. And there's a lot of things that I've learned that through the work that I've done and the cases that I've been involved in, I'm like, okay, I'm going to add these safeguards into my own business, because if anything ever happens, I want to show that I did what I knew to do to protect the client or to, prevent a situation or whatever. And I think it's just about, what I see is that there's two things. One, it's about anticipating a need before there's a need, which is, something that I think a lot of us in this industry are good at, because that's what we do. We're like, oh, I feel the client's skin getting cold, so I'm going to get them a blanket before they ask and say, hey, I've got an extra blanket. You seem cold. Would you like that? And they're like, oh my God, how did you know? So you feel like a genius. But there's also, the not making assumptions we have to work on. I see in some of the cases that I work on, people will say, well, the client didn't say anything, so I assumed it was okay, because they didn't make a complaint. Well, we have to remind ourselves, the client wants to be a good client. They don't know. I mean, there's many of us that have hangups about speaking up when we need something, but someone laying naked on a table that's in a brand new situation and uncomfortable or unfamiliar environment may not even know what words to say. Mm-hmm. So we can't assume that because they're not saying anything that everything's fine. And we have to really work on giving them permission and helping them know what the language is and what the expectations are, so that if that's not being met, that they know, oh, it's okay for me to speak up if I'm cold, or whatever the situation might be, and to be prepared to deal with that when those things happen. So there's a lot more to it, but I think being prepared in advance is better than scrambling after the fact.
Yeah, I completely agree. I want to respect your time. We've gone a little over an hour, but I wanted to see if there was anything else that you'd like to share that we didn't cover today.
That's a great question. I guess, the biggest thing that's in my mind and spirit lately is just about knowing yourself and listening to yourself. It's so easy to get caught up in the shoulds that other people put upon us. And I think it's important to listen to what you know is right for you and to take action from that place, and not just doing things because other people want you to. Good reminder for me today as I'm facing some of my own shoulds over there. But, the other thing is, going back to what I started with was the action. And it's another sort of theory that I use. And that is, remember, it doesn't always matter what the action it is. It's just to take an action. So I would just invite people, if there's something that you have been wanting to do, just do one thing towards it. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the most logical step. I mean, maybe you want to buy a new car, for example, and it's like the logical step might be to see like how much money you have in the bank. But maybe the step you take is to go onto the website and pick out the color. So you've got that little detail. It's still a step. May not be in the order that really makes sense, but just do one thing towards that goal, and that'll give you some momentum, and then you can take the next step and so on.
That analogy, when I opened my spa, I went to Nebraska Furniture Mart. It's like this huge furniture store. It's like Disneyland for furniture. And I picked out my front desk. The space wasn't done. I didn't even know if the thing was going to fit, but I fell in love with this furniture piece, and it started my mind developing what my spa was going to look like and feel like. And I think that's really critical. Like you said, just picking out that color of the car. I mean, just that first step might get you some momentum to keep moving forward, to make other more important decisions and get through some of those obstacles that may be stopping you from taking that action. So great advice, Felicia. Thank you so much for all of what you've shared with us today. We're going to be putting in the comments the links for Felicia's website and how to contact her if you're interested in, getting to know Felicia a little better and how she might be able to help serve you. And follow her on social media and watch the little duckies race, and, be seeing her in her upcoming trainings, because she does exude passion. If you take a class from her, you will feel the passion in the room. And so I'm very grateful for that. Thank you so much, Felicia.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me, Julie. Anytime. I look forward to coming back next time.
Thank you so much for joining me on the Handcrafted Therapy podcast. I would love to hear from you. You can email us at podcast@handcraftedtherapy.com, or you can come by the store. It's at 3303 North Central Expressway, suite number 240 in Plano, Texas, 75023. Or you can connect with me on social, Instagram, Facebook, #HandcraftedTherapy. I'm Julie Alexander, and I wish you a very happy and healthy day.